she set down her wine glass, smiled at me across the table, and said it as lightly as if she were commenting on the weather. "Let's just be honest, shall we? You're not really family. Not in the way that counts. You're Daniel's mother. That's all you've ever been to us." The room went very quiet. I remember the candle flames leaning in the draft from the window. I remember the gravy going cold in its little white boat. I remember my son looking down at his plate, saying nothing at all. And I remember thinking, with a strange and sudden calm, so that is what she believes. After 11 years, after every birthday, every hospital visit, every quiet check I never mentioned, that is what I have been to her all along. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I folded my napkin the way my own mother taught me 60 years ago, and I thanked her for dinner. And on the long drive home through the dark lanes, I made a decision that would quietly change everything. But that decision can wait until morning. Because right now, none of it matters. Not the dinner, not the words, not the cold gravy or the careful smiles. Right now, there is only you and the soft weight of your blanket and the slow, easy rhythm of your own breathing. So let yourself sink a little deeper into the pillow. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your jaw soften and your hands grow heavy and warm. I'm going to tell you the whole story slowly from the beginning. There is nothing for you to do but listen and drift, and let the day fall away behind you. Let me begin. My name doesn't matter very much for a story like this. I am 71 years old. I live alone now in a small stone cottage at the end of a lane that the postman always complains about because the hedges grow wild and brush the sides of his van. The cottage is called Thistledown. My husband, Arthur, named it the day we moved in 40 years ago because the whole garden was full of thistles gone to seed, drifting silver in the evening light. We meant to clear them. Somehow we never did, not entirely. There are still thistles by the back wall, and in late summer the goldfinches come for them, and I have never had the heart to mind. Arthur has been gone 3 winters now. I still make the tea in a pot, though, 2 cups out of habit, and I drink them both slowly while the kitchen fills with morning light. I tell you this so that you understand. I am not a bitter woman. I have had a good life, a long marriage, a warm home. I learned a long time ago that peace is worth more than being right. So when my daughter-in-law said those words to me, something in me did not break. Something in me simply grew very still and very clear, the way a pond goes still after the wind drops, and you can finally see all the way to the bottom. Let me tell you about her. Her name is Caroline. She married my son, Daniel, 11 years ago, on a bright September afternoon in a garden much grander than mine. She was lovely that day, truly lovely, and I cried the happy sort of tears, and I held her hands and told her I had always wanted a daughter, and that now I had one. She smiled at me then, the same light smile, and I did not yet know how to read it. In the years that came after, I tried. Oh, I tried in all the small and quiet ways that a mother-in-law is allowed to try without being a nuisance. When their first child, Emily, was born, I drove 2 hours through sleet to sit in the hospital corridor, just so I would be near, just so I could be the second pair of hands if they needed me. They did not call me in. I sat there until midnight, and then I drove home again, and I never mentioned it. When money was tight, in the early years, I sent what I could. A check tucked into a birthday card, never spoken of. A paid-off boiler one cold December that I let them believe had been covered by some warranty. I did not need thanks. I only wanted them to be warm. I knitted things. I baked things. I remembered every birthday, every school play, every small triumph of my grandchildren. And slowly, year by year, I felt myself becoming a kind of guest in my own family. Welcome, but not quite belonging. Invited, but always to the edge of the table. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that this is simply how families change, how a mother loosens her grip and lets the young ones build their own walls. I told myself a great many gentle, untrue things, because the truth was lonelier than I wanted to hold. And then, at that dinner, Caroline said the quiet thing out loud, and there was nowhere left for it to hide. You're not really family. Now take a slow breath with me. In through the nose, gently, and out like a long sigh, letting your whole body grow heavier against the bed. There is no hurry in this story. We are simply going to follow it, the way you might follow a quiet path through the woods, in no rush to reach the end. The drive home that night was very dark. The lanes out here have no street lamps, only the cat's eyes glowing in the road and the black shapes of the hedges sliding past. I drove slowly. I have never minded driving slowly. And as I drove, I did not feel angry. That surprised me. I had expected anger. Instead, I felt something clearer, something almost like relief, the way you feel when a long-feared appointment is finally over, and you know, at last, exactly where you stand. For 11 years, I had been giving my love to people who set it carefully aside, like an unwanted gift, kept only out of politeness. And I had been so busy giving that I had never once stopped to ask, who, in all my long life, had truly given that love back? by the time I reached Thistledown and the headlights swung across the old stone wall, I had begun, very quietly, to remember. I put the kettle on. I sat at the kitchen table in my coat because the cottage was cold, and I let the names come to me one by one, like guests arriving at a door I had forgotten to open. There was Margaret, my dearest friend of 50 years, who had died the spring before last, and who had spent every Tuesday of her final months sitting in my kitchen, peeling apples, laughing, holding my hand across the very table where I now sat. There was young Thomas from the farm down the lane, who was not mine by any blood at all, but who had shoveled my path every snowy morning since Arthur died, and who never once let me thank him with more than a cup of tea and a slice of cake. There was Sophie. Ah, Sophie. I will tell you about Sophie in a little while, because hers is the gentlest part of this story, and I want you to be good and drowsy before I do. And there was Emily, my granddaughter. Caroline's own daughter, yes, but somehow, against all of it, entirely her own person. Emily, who was 19 now, and who phoned me every Sunday evening without fail, not because anyone made her, but because, she said, my voice made the week feel finished. I sat there in my cold coat with my warm tea, and I understood something that the dinner had, in its cruel way, given to me as a gift. Family is not the people who happen to share your name. Family is the people who keep showing up. Family is the people who peel the apples and shovel the snow and phone on Sunday evenings just to hear your voice. And I had been so afraid of losing the family I was supposed to have that I had nearly failed to notice the family I actually did. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. There is nothing more you need to see, just my voice and the quiet and the slow unspooling of the story. The next morning was very beautiful. They often are after a hard night. The frost had come in silver across the lawn, and the low sun lit it all up like something scattered with sugar. And the robin who has decided he owns my garden sat on the handle of the spade and watched me through the window. I made my 2 cups of tea. I drank them slowly. And then I did something I had not done in a very long time. I went to the bureau in the front room, the old walnut one that was Arthur's mother's, and I took out the long brown envelope that held my will. I read it through at the kitchen table while the frost melted off the grass. It was, I will be honest with you, a rather sad document. Everything to Daniel and Caroline. The cottage, the savings, Arthur's watch, my mother's ring. Everything to the 2 people who had made it so very clear that I was not, in the way that counts, family. I had written it that way years ago, of course, because that is simply what one does. You leave it to your children. You don't think about it. You assume that love flows downward like water, and that it will be received as it was given. But I was thinking about it now, and as the frost turned to dew and the robin hopped along the wall, I began, very calmly, to imagine a different document, a truer one. Now I want to be clear with you, because this matters, and because I would not want you to drift off thinking this is a story about revenge. It is not. I felt no wish to punish Caroline. Punishment is just anger wearing a respectable coat, and I was far too old and far too tired for anger. What I felt, instead, was a great clear longing to tell the truth, at last, with the one quiet voice that the world cannot argue with. A will is the last letter you ever write. I had spent 11 years failing to say what I meant. I did not want my last letter to be a lie. So a few days later, I telephoned Mr. Aldous, my solicitor, a kind and unhurried man who has been minding my small affairs for 30 years, and I asked him if I might come in. But before I tell you what I did in his office, let me make you a cup of tea in the story, so to speak, and let us slow right down, because you are doing so well at letting go. Breathe in slow and soft, and out. Feel how heavy your arms have become, how warm. Feel the bed holding you completely, so that you do not have to hold yourself up at all. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing to carry. Just the next quiet word and the next. The week before my appointment, Sophie came to stay. I promised I would tell you about Sophie, and now is the time, while everything is soft. 25 years ago, when Sophie was a little girl of 6, she lived next door with her mother, who was very young and very alone and very often unwell. And on the days her mother could not manage, Sophie would slip through the gap in the hedge, the same gap the goldfinches use, and she would appear at my back door in her socks, and I would let her in. I taught her to bake. I taught her to plant sweet peas, and to tie her shoelaces, and to whistle through a blade of grass. For 7 years, until they moved away, that little girl spent more hours in my kitchen than in her own. She was not mine, and she was entirely mine. Both things were true. I had not seen her in over a decade when, the spring after Arthur died, a letter arrived in careful, grown-up handwriting. She had found me. She was a nurse now, married, with a little girl of her own. And she wanted, she wrote, to come and say a thank you that was 20 years overdue. She has come every few months since. She brings her daughter, who is 6, the very age Sophie was, and the little one slips through the gap in the hedge in her socks, and my old kitchen fills up with flour and laughter. And for an afternoon, the years fall away entirely. That week, Sophie sat with me at the table, and I told her what Caroline had said. I had not meant to. It simply came out, the way the truest things do, in a warm kitchen with someone who is listening. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand, exactly where Margaret used to take it, and she said, "You were the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth keeping." And I understood then, with perfect clarity, what my last letter needed to say. Let yourself drift now. You don't need to follow every word. Let them wash over you like warm water, like the sound of rain on a roof when you are safe and dry beneath it. Mr. Aldous' office is up a narrow staircase above the old bakery in town, and it smells wonderfully of bread and dust and furniture polish. He sat me down in the good chair, and he made the tea himself, and he did not rush me. I told him I wished to change my will. He nodded and took out his pen and waited, as if changing one's will were the most natural thing in the world, which I suppose, to him, it is. I did not leave Daniel out. I want you to know that. He is my son, and I love him, even when he says nothing while his plate grows cold. I left him Arthur's watch, and a good and fair portion of the savings, and a letter, to be opened only by him, in which I told him gently that I had always seen him, and always would, and that I hoped one day he would learn to look up from his plate. But the cottage, my thistledown, with its wild thistles and its goldfinches and its gap in the hedge, I left to Emily, to the granddaughter who phones on Sunday evenings, because she loves this house the way you can only love a place that has loved you back, and I could not bear to think of it sold to strangers who would pull up the thistles and never know why they mattered. To Thomas from the farm, who shovels my snow, I left a sum that made Mr. Aldous' eyebrows rise, and which will, I hope, mend the roof of his barn, and let him marry that patient young woman he has been courting far too cautiously. And to Sophie, my Sophie, who slipped through the hedge in her socks all those years ago, I left my mother's ring. The ring I had always assumed would go to a daughter-in-law. I left it to the girl I had quietly mothered for 7 years, with a note that said only, "From the first person who thought you were worth keeping, to keep." When it was done, Mr. Aldous read it all back to me in his slow, kind voice, and I sat in the good chair above the bakery, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like myself, whole and clear and unafraid. It was not revenge. It was simply the truth, written down at last, in the one place where no one could smile it away. Stay with me, here in the warm. You are almost at the end now, and the end is the softest part of all. I walked home that day instead of driving. It is 3 miles by the river path, and the afternoon was golden, and the water moved along beside me, slow and brown and patient, the way water has moved along beside people forever. I did not tell Caroline what I had done. I did not tell Daniel. There was no triumph in it that needed an audience. Some things you do not do to be seen doing them. You do them because they are true, and then you carry the quiet of them home like a warm stone in your pocket. Things did not magically change between us. I want to be honest with you, even now, as you are drifting. Caroline did not arrive at my door with tears and apologies. Real life so rarely ties its bows that neatly. But something in me had changed, and that turned out to be enough. I stopped reaching for a love that was never going to reach back. I let my hands rest, and into the space where all that reaching used to be, the real family came flooding, quietly, the way light comes into a room when you finally open the curtains you forgot were closed. Emily comes most weekends now. We garden together, and she has learned the names of all the birds. And last Sunday, she asked me to teach her to make Margaret's apple tart. And I cried a little, the good sort, into the flower. Sophie writes and visits, and her little girl knows the gap in the hedge. And on Tuesday afternoons, I still set out 2 cups, and I think of Margaret, and I am not lonely. I am simply accompanied by everyone who ever truly loved me, which, I have come to understand, is a far larger number than I once believed. That is the whole of it. That is the story of the night my daughter-in-law told me I was not really family, and how, in the strangest way, it gave me my family back. So let it go now, all of it. The dinner, the words, the long dark drive. Let it dissolve like sugar in warm tea. You have nothing to decide tonight. No will to rewrite, no table to sit at, no love to chase. There is only the warmth of your bed, and the soft dark, and the slow tide of your own breathing, carrying you gently out. Breathe in slow and easy, and out slower still. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you need to be. Let the next breath be even softer than the last, and the next softer still. Rest now, sleep now. I will keep the kettle warm and the light on in the window, and I will be here telling quiet stories whenever you need somewhere gentle to go. Good night.